their taxes are slightly higher.
All right, good morning, everyone. Before I call this meeting to order, I'll note that I will serve as acting chair today. I now call to order the meeting of the Bond Financing Committee, members of the New York State Urban Development Corporation, doing business as Empire State Development, December 6, 2018. The meeting is being webcast. Committee members have received the relevant written materials in advance and are free to ask questions at any time. We welcome public comment on today's agenda. 2 minutes if you're speaking on behalf of yourself, or 4 minutes if you're speaking on behalf of a group. I'll ask committee members if anyone has any conflict of interest with respect to the item on today's agenda. Hearing no conflicts, I'll now ask Jonathan Byer to present today's agenda item, which relates to the issuance of state personal income tax revenue bonds. Jonathan.
Thank you, and good morning. The Bond Financing Committee of the New York State Urban Development Corporation is being asked to approve the submission of an application to the New York State Public Authorities Board, PACB, in connection with the proposed issuance of state personal income tax revenue bonds, known as the PIT bonds, and to authorize the corporation to enter into contracts with bond counsel in connection with the issuance of these bonds. ESD is authorized to assist in financing certain correctional facilities, economic development projects, housing projects, various capital projects, and equipment projects. ESD has been requested by the Division of Budget to issue additional PIT bonds, the proceeds of which will be used to fund these projects and pay all costs and expenses of ESD incurred in connection with the issuance of these bonds. The Public Authorities Law requires the approval of PACB for the bonds, and staff is seeking the corporation's authorization to submit an application to PACB for such approval. The application is also attached to your materials. The PIT bonds will have a fixed rate of interest, and the bonds will be issued in an amount not to exceed $1,850,000,000, including all the issuance costs. Bond counsel is necessary to represent the corporation for this transaction. Staff contacted 4 law firms identified on the pre-qualified counsel list as having senior-tier bond financing experience. Staff recommends the retention of Nixon Peabody as co-bond counsel for the PIT bonds based on their knowledge and expertise, prior experience, including specific experience in PIT bond issuances, prior satisfactory work which the firm performed for the corporation, and the corporation's pre-qualification process. For these reasons, staff is requesting that Nixon be retained for this transaction. Staff also contacted 4 law firms identified on the pre-qualified counsel list as having junior-tier bond financing expertise, and these firms are also certified MWBEs. Staff recommends the retention of Perlman and Miranda as co-bond counsel for the PIT bonds based on their knowledge and expertise, prior experience as bond counsel, including specific experience in PIT bond issuances, and the corporation's pre-qualification process. For these reasons, staff is requesting that Perlman be retained for this transaction. The appointment of both firms also represents an equitable distribution of work among the corporation's rotating slate of senior and junior tier bond firms and MWBE law firms to handle the corporation's debt in terms of size and number of transactions, fees received, and length of time since their last engagement. Accordingly, the directors are now asked to approve the submission of the attached application to PACB and to authorize the retention of Nixon and Perlman as bond counsel to the corporation, and for all such legal services as are described in these materials in an amount not to exceed, for both firms, $350,000.
Okay, any questions from directors on the PIT revenue bonds? About when was the last time we were involved with issuance of a PIT revenue bond?
Just about exactly a year ago.
Exactly a year ago?
We did not actually, and these bonds will be issued in 2019, so we actually will not have any PIT bonds in 2018.
Anything unusual or out of the ordinary about this issuance versus other previous issuances we've been involved with?
No. It's in excess of $1 billion, which is typical. There's how many projects?
There's approximately 200 projects, just ESD administered economic development projects. In addition to that, we are issuing on behalf of other agencies as well, which I'd say pretty similar to past bond issuances.
Actually, for the first time ever, we're issuing bonds for the MTA.
Yeah, I see that.
We've never done that before.
I see that. I was going to ask you, how did that happen? What's the impetus behind doing that?
Division of Budget did not share why that's been added to the list, but, the list is so long.
Clearly helps them. They need it.
Yeah. I'm sure it's not enough to do what needs to be done.
What has, given the recent Fed rate increases, what effect has that been, I mean, obviously upward, but to what extent has that affected where our interest rates are gonna fall, you think?
I'm not really sure. I mean, I know that the POS that we're about to issue does include the provisions that the state has adopted as a sort of get-around for the elimination of the state and local tax deduction. I think I read in the paper that not many employers have opted in to one part of that get-around. And the other part of the get-around, which is, I guess, a charitable deduction, it's too early to say how, if it's going to be successful. But I think as Kevin and I were talking just before the meeting started, sometimes the more complicated the tax credit exemption and the get-around is, the fewer people avail themselves of the benefits. And the newspapers have indicated that it's complicated and people just kind of shy away from it. And the feds have announced, or at least the Treasury has announced, that they will be disinclined to approve these kind of get-arounds. So it's kind of a guesswork as to where it's going to end up.
So we don't know that.
We don't know that, but this OS does disclose that, and there are certain changes to the PIT bond program that have to be reflected, because the amount of state personal income tax is going to be reduced by the number of people that have these options. So they're depositing in an alternative fund so that the total amount of tax payments put in the lockbox will be exactly the same, but they're calling it something different. But the total amount will be the same.
And the debt service coverage will be.
You gotta speak up a little louder.
The debt service coverage on the PIT bonds will be at least as high as it was prior to these. They've sort of overcompensated the amount of funds that they're putting into that revenue bond tax fund, that lockbox.
Okay. Any other questions from directors? Are there any comments from the public on this item? Is there a motion to
Move it.
approve the item?
Second.
Second, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None? Okay, thank you, Jonathan. I'll call for a motion to adjourn the meeting since there are no other
Second.
items. We are adjourned. Thank you all.
Just an administrative note to the board members. Because there's a sort of an accelerated timeframe on getting these bonds issued, generally, we have a second meeting for the committee to have an opportunity to review the documents. So we are going to have that second meeting, but it's going to be fairly quickly. It's going to be at the next.
Tomorrow, no.
So
On the 20th.
ESD is meeting again on December
Yeah,
20th.
right.
So we're planning to do the same thing, as to have the bond financing
Right.
committee meet. You'll be given the documents. They'll be slightly less final than normally the documents are, but what will not be really as final are the actual numbers, which we don't really.
When is that?
December 20th. So we'll
That
have.
meeting's already on the schedule though for the board, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
and we're adding, we're adding the bond financing committee to that, so that the board members are not inconvenienced
We're just
multiple
gonna-
times in a short period of
Yeah.
time.
That'll be just before our regular board meeting, right?
Debbie's not,
Yeah, I think so.
Debbie? Oh, the bond finance committee will be before the ESD meeting?
Right before.
Right before.
Our regular meeting is at 9:30. Are we gonna meet before that?
Yes.
Yes.
So we'll meet at like 9 or?
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.